really cool, guys? 8 mana commanders. You know what's really cool about 8 mana commanders? They cost way too much, and there's no feasible way to get them out in a reasonable amount of time. I'm lying to you. I'm lying to you. We're going to talk about Corvol today, and he's an 8 mana commander, and he's definitely going to come out on time, and he's going to do some wonderful stuff. This is a commander that looks like he wants to be an aristocrat's commander. Nuh-uh. We're playing him very, very shoddy Voltron deck. All kinds of weird things are about to happen. Let's talk about Corvol. Corvol, Gleeful Glutton, is a Jund and 5/8 mana beast of a commander with flying, trample, haste, 4 power, 4 toughness, the ability to discount himself by 1 for every card type we throw into the graveyard this turn via sacrifice, and also if he manages to punch a player in the schnoz, he'll gain X/1/1 counters, and we will draw X cards, where that is the number of permanent cards in our graveyard. So, on its surface, Corvol looks like he cares a lot about being an aristocrat-style commander, just like the original Corvol, the Faker's King, and also he seems to care about everything a Tarmogoyf cares about, making sure there's a lot of permanent types in the graveyard. Let's go ahead and focus on that second part of his ability, though, the getting X/1/1 counters and drawing X cards. Let's make sure we can benefit from that the most so that this commander makes sense for us. For getting all the permanent types in our graveyard, let's go ahead and use Dredge to populate our graveyard. Golgari Thug and Shambling Shell both have Dredge 3 and 4, so if they hit our graveyard at any point, we can use them to replace our draws with throwing cards from the top of our deck into our graveyard. This will allow us to get a nice and thick grave for Corvol to benefit from. We don't want to be throwing too many cards away to Dredge because we can deck ourselves out with Corvol, so just be very careful when using this mechanic. Also, to benefit the most from Corvol's ability, we will be giving him Double Strike with Fire Shrieker and the Two-Handed Axe. The sweeping cleave of the Two-Handed Axe and the basic ability of the Fire Shrieker giving Double Strike means that when Corvol touches somebody, he will be dealing combat damage once, drawing us a bunch of cards for it, getting a bunch of counters, and then dealing it again, getting all those counters again, and drawing us those cards again. So if Corvol sees 4 cards in the grave, he'll hit you once for 4, and then another time for 8, drawing you 8 cards total, and having 8 counters total, becoming a 12/12. This means that we should be able to lethal a player very quickly by using these abilities, but also we'll be digging through our deck at a rapid pace. Speaking of equipment, we need to go ahead and protect our Corvol with Mirror Shield and Mask of Avacyn. These give Corvol hexproof and allow us to keep going forward with our strategy without worrying about losing our big commander. Since we're going to be throwing cards in the grave, we're going to go ahead and add a Victimize into the deck and a Nyx Weaver. These both have the ability to recur cards from our graveyard, but importantly, Nyx Weaver is an enchantment creature, meaning it supplies 2 of the card types for both of Corvol's abilities. And because we care about card types being in the graveyard, let's go ahead and add a little bit of Tarmogoyf love so that our deck has even more power. Altar of the Goyf says that when one of our creatures attacks alone, it will get XX, where X is the number of card types in our graveyard. This also supplies Kindred and Artifact as 2 permanent types if it touches our graveyard. This means that we'll be able to double up on the power from Corvol's ability with or without those 1/1 counters. Polygoyf has Trample and Myriad, and its power and toughness are equal to the card types in all of our graveyard +1, and Tarmogoyf Nest will spawn Tarmogoyf tokens, which have the exact same power and toughness. Number of card types in our graveyard +1. All in all, that's going to be everything for the main bulk of the deck, though, because really everything else is going to be serving purposes of either draw, removing, or ramping us into Corvol because he is so expensive. So let's get into the other areas of the deck, shall we? Let's talk about drawing cards. Now, while our commander does have the ability to draw plenty of cards, let's go ahead and supplement that with a pretty hefty draw engine as well, beginning with Brainstone, letting us sacrifice it to draw 3 and put 2 from the top of our hand on the top of our library. This is a incredibly good spell in this deck because it is an artifact, which means it is a permanent, so not only can we discount Corvol a little bit when we sacrifice it, we also have the ability to power him up more by putting this draw card in the graveyard. Rummaging Goblin allows us to discard cards to draw cards. Thrill of possibility does the same, filling up our grave for Corvold. Baba Lysaga can sacrifice up to 3 permanents, and if 3 or more card types were in those sacrificed permanents, then each opponent loses 3 life, we gain 3 life, and we draw 3 cards. Baba Lysaga gets us through our deck very quickly and also makes sure that Corvold is nice and discounted. Grizzly Salvage lets us grab a card from the top 5 of our library and put it in our hand, and also throws everything else into the graveyard, powering up Corvold. Harmonize lets us draw 3 cards, very easy, so does Ambition's Cost. Unbridled Growth is a cantrip in our deck as we pay 1 mana for it, and then sack it immediately to draw a card and discount Corvold. Peer Past the Veil allows us to discard our hand, then draw X cards, where X is the number of card types in our graveyard, which we are filling up with every other card. Malevolent Rumble lets us reveal the top 4, put a permanent card from among them in our hand, and then make an Eldrazi spawn that can sack itself for mana, which gives us double benefit for Corvold. It'll see a creature sacrifice, discounting itself by 1, and give us 1 mana, which will pay for Corvold. Then we have Mazzolani the Grey Door, which can give us lots of mana for Corvold, and also has the ability to let us discard cards and draw cards, letting us dig through the deck and also fill up the grave for Corvold's secondary ability. Also, if this is flipped, the core gives us mana in any one color, where that's the number of permanents in our graveyard. Then we have Invasion of Kaldheim. I wanted to add some battles to this deck because battle is in fact a permanent type that Corvold can see. When Invasion of Kaldheim touches the battlefield, exile all cards from our hand, then draw that many cards. Until end of turn, we can play those cards. And if we punch the Invasion of Kaldheim, we'll create Pyre of the World Tree that lets us discard lands to deal 2 damage to any target. And anytime we discard a land, we get Impulse Draw. Altogether, these should supplement Corvold's drawing ability, but that's not all you need to make a deck function. Let's go ahead and talk about how we are going to stop our opponents from winning the game by blowing up their shit. As for removal, we will be running a 15-card interaction package beginning with Torch Fiend. We pay a mana to sacrifice it to blow up any target artifact, but by sacrificing the Torch Fiend, we discount Corvold by 1, so this is effectively a free sacrifice. Fatal Grudge allows us to sacrifice any non-land permanent, and then each opponent chooses a permanent with the same type and sacrifices that, and then this draws us a card as well. We pay 2 mana into it to get its ability, but then we end up discounting Corvold by 1, so it's like paying 1 mana for it. Voracious Varmint can sacrifice itself to blow up an artifact or an enchantment. Fear of Burning Alive deals 4 damage to every opponent, and if we have 4 or more card types in our graveyard, anytime one of our sources deal non-combat damage to an opponent, Fear of Burning Alive will also do that much damage to a creature a player controls. Please note, while we don't have a lot of non-combat damage in the deck, if we have a setup graveyard, dropping Fear of Burning Alive means we can get rid of 3 creatures on the board immediately. Cankerbloom can blow up an artifact, enchantment, or proliferate the counters on Corvold. Seal of Doom can sacrifice itself to blow up any non-black creature, and it's an enchantment, so it will go into the graveyard and count towards Corvold's abilities. Drag to the Roots allows us to blow up any non-land permanent for 2 mana. Accursed Marauder lets us make everybody sacrifice a creature for 2 mana. Demon's Disciples and Plaguecrafter do the same thing for 3. Putrefy can blow up any artifact or creature. Seal of Primordium can blow up an artifact or an enchantment, and it is an enchantment, so it will count towards Corvold's abilities. Rankle, Master of Pranks, can make everybody discard cards, draw cards, and sack creatures, all of which Corvold loves. Rise of the Witch King can make every player lose a creature, and then if we lost one this way, we immediately revive any card from our graveyard onto the battlefield. Any permanent card whatsoever, without paying its mana cost. And then we have Cindervines, which can make a Storm player cry, but also lets us pay 1 to sacrifice it to blow up an artifact or an enchantment, populating our graveyard with a sacrificed enchantment, which Corvold loves. As for board wipes, we're going to be running 2 of them. One of them is Necromantic Selection, since Corvold will be able to be revived with this after we blow up the board, and Invasion of Fiora, which we can use to asymmetrically wipe the board, keeping Corvold alive, and it is a battle, of course, so if this touches the graveyard, that's just more permanent cards in the grave for Corvold to see. Also, on the backside, it turns into Marchesa, who could step on me, but Marchesa has Menace, Death Touch, and whenever she attacks, she can remove all counters from any permanent, allowing her to blow up a planeswalker instantly. And at the beginning of our upkeep, if we haven't been dealt any damage since our last turn, we get to draw a card and lose 1 life. Yeah, nobody's ever going to allow you to actually do that, but the fact that she does have a removal spell on top of just being a good board wipe on the backside is fantastic enough, and enough of a reason to run in this deck, especially since it is a permanent we can sack to something like Baba Lysaga and get way more discounts on Corvold than we originally planned. That all said, that's all of our removals, so let's go ahead and talk about trying to afford all of the very expensive cards in this deck. Now, we do have a very expensive commander, so our ramp section is 22 cards deep. Far more than I usually would include, but I think you'll see a running theme through these as you run through them. Wild Cantor can sacrifice itself to add a mana of any color, which means that it's discounting Corvol by 1 and then ramping us by 1. Call of the Scions makes 2 Eldrazi Scions that can sack themselves for 1 mana. Eldrazi Repurposer makes an Eldrazi that can be sacked for mana. Scion Summoner makes an Eldrazi that can be sacked for mana. Then we have Burnished Heart that can sacrifice itself, become an artifact creature for 2 of Corvol's mana requirements, and also gets 2 basic lands out of the deck onto the battlefield. Font of Fertility is an enchantment that sacks itself to get a land out of the deck onto the battlefield. Goldhound is an artifact creature that sacrifices itself for mana. We have another battle with Invasion of Urgamon. When it touches the battlefield, we make a treasure token. Then we can discard a card and draw a card. And if we flip it, we get Truga Cliff Charger, which as it enters the battlefield, we can discard a card. And if we do, search our library for any land and put it on the battlefield. If we punch this invasion, we get free ramp. Then we have Heaped Harvest, which gives us 1 land when we play it and another land when we sacrifice it. Dawn Shredder Elk gives us a land when we sacrifice it too. Command Sphere can sacrifice itself to draw us a card and also tap for mana. Reckless Barbarian can sacrifice itself to give us 2 red mana. Colony Heart Expedition gives us 2 lands when we sacrifice it. Wayfarer's Bauble sacrifices itself to get another land out of our deck. I hope you're seeing the theme here. All of our stuff that we are ramping, for the most part, has to sacrifice itself in one way, shape, or form so that we can get its benefit, meaning we'll advance our mana state and also discount our commander. Mindstone sacrifices itself to draw us a card. Springbloom Druid sacrifices a land to get 2 lands on the battlefield. Invasion of Zendikar grabs 2 lands out of the deck onto the battlefield and also can become a mana dork if we kill it. Roiling Regrowth sacrifices a land to get 2 lands onto the battlefield. Blood Pet sacrifices itself to create 1 black mana. Growth Spasm gets us a land and also an Eldrazi spawn that can sack itself for mana. Tinderwall sacks itself for 2 red mana, and Sakura Tribe Elder sacrifices itself as a rampant growth ability. That was a lot of ramp spells, and most of them kill themselves for our benefit, which is exactly what you want in Corvol, all things considered. So let's go ahead and get into the actual lands in the deck as well to see what we're working with. Of course, we got our basic lands, 4 mountains, 5 forests, 4 swamps, and then in our dual lands, we have Smoldering Marsh and Cinderglade as our searchables, Tainted Wood and Tainted Peak for our lands that have conditions. Tainted Wood's also not something you want to wake up with in the morning, and Shadowblood Ridge, Mossfire Valley, and Viridescent Bog as dual lands that are filter lands. All of these come into play untapped, and so they should be nice and speedy and will make up for our whopping 13 card fetching land package. All of these lands sacrifice themselves to get their abilities, so they discount Corvol and they go into the graveyard, counting towards his secondary ability. Evolving Wilds, of course, sacks itself to get any basic land from the deck, so does Terramorphic Expanse, and so does Escape Tunnel. After that, Myriad Landscape allows us to ramp when we crack it. Then we have all of the panoramas, Esper Panorama, Grixis Panorama, Jund Panorama, Naya and Bant, and Shire Terrace and Promising Vein. All of them sacrifice themselves to get a land out of the deck, which is what we're looking for. Twisted Landscape is the power creep version of Evolving Wilds for tricolor decks, as it is fast mana normally that can also just sacrifice itself or cycle itself. Then we've got Riveteer's Outlook, which will auto-kill itself to get a land out of our deck onto the battlefield. After that, we've got some utility lands with Pit of Offerings to control graveyards, Volatile Fault that can sacrifice itself to blow up an opponent's Glacial Chasm, Command Tower, and Exotic Orchard as our Omni lands. All in all, we have a very comprehensive ramp package here and a very comprehensive land package. Most of the work went into those packages to make sure that Corvol will be able to come out on time and always function. But that's a lot of words I'm saying. Why don't we go ahead and do a gameplay and see how he runs? All right, let's go ahead and talk about capable hands. If you've got a couple pieces of mana, if you've got some ramp spells, and you have draw, you have a keepable hand. In our hand, we have a lot of ramp, actually. No draw, but we do have a board wipe. So without draw, we do have the ability to make sure our opponents are set back if they decide to push ahead really, really quickly. So we're going to go ahead and keep the hand, even though it's missing one of the pieces I'd like to have. We draw into a Harmonize. Now the hand is complete. We have removal, we have ramp, we have lots of ways to get permanents in the graveyard. We are golden. Let's go ahead and play that Forest and tap it for a Wayfarer's Bauble. Next turn comes up, and we've drawn Mirror Shield. We can go ahead and play Exotic Orchard, tap 2, sack the Wayfarer's Bauble, and go into the deck to get a land. And we know that we have Necromantic Selection in the hand, so we're going to have to get a Swamp. Next turn comes up, we've drawn a Plaguecrafter, which means we are currently missing one of our land drops. Not where we want to be, but it's not the worst thing in the world. So let's go ahead and pay 3 mana. Let's play Heaped Harvest, get a land out of our deck, and try to catch back up. Turn 4, and we have missed another land drop, unfortunately, so we have a couple of options here. We can either guarantee we get 2 lands by cracking Heaped Harvest and playing Sakura Tribe Elder, or we can gamble and use Harmonize to try to dig through our deck for some lands. I think at this stage, we've missed the land drops, so I'm okay trying to see if we can find them with Harmonize. And we got a Jund Panorama, so that ended up panning out for us. And given that we are in a situation where Corvol needs to be maximally online when it touches the board, we can end our turn discarding the Invasion of Fiora from our hand because we have Necromantic Selection. This allows us to have a battle in our graveyard, and if we take a look at our graveyard right now, it has a battle in it, and it will soon have a land, and it will have an artifact and a creature, meaning Corvol will be maximally online when he comes out. Likely on turn 6. Not what I was hoping for, but it is what it is. The next turn is here, and we have Unbridled Growth. We can go ahead and play that and attach it to really anything at all, and we'll have access to that to get our Corvol turn online proper when that happens. Next, we need to go ahead and pay 2 mana and get rid of our Heaped Harvest to go ahead and get a land out of the deck. And we're going to pay 2 mana to play Steve and sack Steve to go ahead and get another land out of the deck. We are on turn 6, and we have a couple of options here. We got 2 swamps out of our deck with our last run, so we can either go ahead and get our commander out, get him online, or we can use Necromantic Selection to set all of our opponents back. I'm going to assume that everybody has got very established boards, but I want to bait out some removal first, so let's go ahead and sacrifice the Unbridled Growth to draw a card. We don't really have any access to this Malevolent Rumble, but that puts an enchantment in our graveyard, discounting Corvol by 1. This allows us to tap 7 mana to get our commander on the board. Now that he's out, we need to go ahead and do a graveyard check and see what permanent types we have access to. We have an enchantment, a creature, we have an artifact, and a battle, which means we have access to 4 types. Corvol's going to swing at somebody and generate 4 1/1 counters on himself and draw us 1, 2, 3, 4 cards. We get to go ahead and place that forest down as our land per turn, and with a 2-handed axe, we actually will be able to eliminate a player in the following turn, so that's going to be great. Now all that's left to do is look at our hand, see we have 11 cards, and figure out what we are going to be discarding out of our hand. We know that we need a land in the graveyard so that we get more power with Corvol, so we're going to choose that forest to go away. After that, we need to get rid of this Shambling Shell as it has Dredge, so we will have access to that later. We have enchantments and we have creatures in the graveyard already, so we can keep Fear of Burning alive in our hand, but we have plenty of mana, plenty of other stuff. I think at this stage we get rid of the Malevolent Rumble, and we probably get rid of the Polygoyf. As good as the Polygoyf is, we're going to be eliminating a player right now, so we don't need to play the grind game. We keep Polygoyf in hands where we know we're going to have to do War of Attrition with people, but our commander's online with 2-headed axe. We're probably in the end zone already. We are on turn 7, and at this stage, we're just going to go ahead and aim Corvol at whichever player we aimed him at in the last turn. We may go ahead and drop a Mirror Shield on him real quick, just to make sure that nothing bad happens to our baby. That's just an insurance policy. Let's go ahead and make sure that he is well protected in case things go south. Now, we're going to enter combat. Swing Corvol at a player. We have 5 permanent types in our graveyard because we threw away that forest. So we can go ahead and pay 1, 2. We're going to go ahead and get this Sweeping Strike on Corvol. So he's going to be hitting for 8 on one player, and then he's going to generate 5 counters. So he'll be hitting for 13 afterwards, generating 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 more counters. 8 plus 13 is 21, so even if we don't swing it at the player we hit initially, we are eliminating one player out of the game automatically. That player is gone, and we are drawing 10 cards. And with all those cards drawn, we can go ahead and get a Smoldering Marsh on the board, and we have all this stuff that we can cast. Let's go ahead and get Blood Pet out in case our opponents try to get rid of our commander, and let's go ahead and make sure that a Cursed Marauder is on the board and sacking itself so that everybody loses a creature. Let's say that Corvol was aimed at the tokens player who had the big board, and so a Cursed Marauder is doing maximum damage to the last few players. After this, all that's left to figure out is what we are discarding. And I think Esper Panorama can definitely leave. We don't need this invasion. We don't need this invasion. We don't really need the Twisted Landscape. And looking at everything else, we probably don't need the Malevolent Rumble at this point. And we probably need the Plaguecrafter. But we have lots of mana, so we don't need the Roiling Regrowth. This will give us a hand of 8. We need to discard one more down. I'd like to keep this land in case we lose Corvol, so we're gonna go ahead and have to remove something else. Maybe the Reckless Barbarian. We already have the Blood Pet on the board, so we have access to a sacrificed creature and ramp already. All right, we are now at turn 8, and we're going to go ahead and call this the penultimate turn. We're going to drop the Cinderglade on the board, and we are going to aim Corvol at a player. Ideally, the player who Corvol hasn't hit yet, to go ahead and kill that player. Our two-handed axe was in the exile zone, so we are going to tap 1, 2, 3 mana to cast the axe, and then we are going to pay 2 mana to place the axe on Corvol. Now, when Corvol swings, he will double his power. So he's going to be aimed at one player for 36 damage, drawing us 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 cards. Remember, the axe only gives double strike once and then gives double damage afterwards. Awkwardly, we drew Altar of the Goyf, so we can play this to get more big damage on Corvol in the following turn to annihilate the last player. This kind of makes us a bit of an asshole, but I think I'm okay with being a bit of an asshole to the last player with Corvol, especially since he's already going to be swinging with 23 power base. Just for shits and giggles, let's go ahead and do the math real quick. Altar of the Goyf is here, and let's say we discarded the Tarmogoyf Nest out of our hand during the last turn. So, Altar of the Goyf goes onto the battlefield, and this says our creatures will get XX until end of turn whenever they swing alone. Looking at our graveyard, we have 6 permanent types because Tarmogoyf Nest touched the graveyard, giving us Kindred to add to all of our other permanent types. So Corvol has a base power of 29-29. When he swings, the axe is going to double that 29-29 into 58-58. And then after he punches somebody to add insult to injury, he will stack 6 more 1/1 counters onto himself and will get that much bigger, in case he didn't magically eliminate somebody off of this hit. I know this felt like we were building an Aristocrats deck looking at everything that was there, but nah, it's definitely just a Voltron deck. It's definitely just a Voltron deck making sure that Corvol hits really, really big and only a handful of times. This monster is nutty, but let's talk about what you would do if you had a little more money and you wanted to upgrade the card. Now, the name of the game when upgrading this deck is to just make our cards that are already doing decent stuff do more. So any card that's an artifact creature, make it ramp. Any of our instants that we are running, make them hit more cards. That's really all we're trying to do here. So in lieu of that, one of the best upgrades you can throw into the deck is this Sad Robot. This card lets you, and wow, it's 23 cents right now. Normally it's like 40 cents or 50 cents, which makes it outside of what my deck can afford. So I guess Sad Robot is able to be here. Anyway, touches the battlefield, gives you a basic land, and when it goes to the graveyard, you get to draw a card. That's perfect for a deck like this. The new Winter Cynical Opportunist is also fantastic, because whenever he swings, you get to mill 3 cards, and his Delirium ability can let you reanimate cards from the graveyard. Grist the Hungertide is a planeswalker and a creature in the graveyard, which is perfect. Also, it has a sacrifice ability, which is also amazing for what deck we're trying to build. Beast Within gives us access to more kinds of removal. Revitalizing Repast gives us access to more protection for Corvol. Deadly Dispute will let us sacrifice stuff to keep treasures on the board and draw, which lets us keep the deck running smoothly. Haywire Might is more ways to blow up artifacts and enchantments while also being 2 types at once. Brass's Tunnel Grinder will benefit us for every single card we are sacrificing, as it will be able to flip into the Searing Rift and give us Discover on all of our stuff, and give us a wheel effect when we play it. Like, honestly, the card's perfect. I wish I could have fit it in the deck's original budget. Awakening Zone makes Eldrazi spawn constantly, which Corvol adores. Tireless Provisioner will give us treasure tokens, which do double duty with Corvol, as you can sacrifice treasures to get 1 mana, and then they are an artifact that went away, so they count as a mana discount on Corvol. Lizard Blades will be another way to give Corvol's double strike. Vraska lets us sacrifice any non-land permanent at all, or any permanent at all in general, to gain a life and draw a card, and also has a removal spell attached to her. And then Conduit of Worlds will let us recast spells from our grave and replay lands from our grave at any point. All of these and more are things that will just make this deck sing and go far, far faster. But the base version of the deck is doing everything it needs to do already. So I hope you guys end up enjoying it. That said, let me know what you think in the comments section below for Corvol. I think he is a wonderful new commander. He looks like he wants to be a, you know, an aristocrat commander, but the reality is he just plays like a Voltron commander, getting big enough to punch somebody once, and then that's it. Their lights are out. That's what his goal is. So we're playing him that way. That all said, let me know what you think in the comments section below. Hit the like button if you haven't already, and as always, everybody, insert end of video tagline here. Hey, just wanted to give a quick thank you to all of my wonderful patrons who help keep me afloat and help keep this channel going. YouTube and Twitch are wonderful platforms, but at the end of the day, stability is not one of their strong suits. If you want to support my channel, then obviously Patreon is one of the best ways of doing that. Link is in the description. But I do want to personally thank everybody who has contributed to the channel. Those people would be Red Joker, Purple Poundini, Jemshin, Britzkrieg, Jupe the Malignant, Michael, Ravalern, Mabbity Babbity, Astral Frontier, Autumn and Angel, Nixie Chan, Agamotto, Victorian Alchemist, I'm not saying the last part of that, and you know that, Arcton Arclacier, Kiratorian, Dren Hadamata, Jordan M, John L, Lord Bleck, Smiling Game Master, and Fireshard. And everyone else who supports my channel and lets me do what I do full time. This is a dream job of mine that I never believed that I would be able to take full time, and with your help, I've been able to do it. So thank you so very much for that. Thank you for watching the video. I hope you all enjoy, and I hope you all are having a wonderful time. I will see you all in the next one, hopefully.